children. Feel the pulse of their excitement and the thrill in every smile. Driven by the things they hear and what they see, they are free to dream big dreams of the kind of future they want as leaders, inventors, and thinkers. Truth is, every single person out of the over 7 billion humans living on planet Earth is free to dream. But when it comes to the catalyst that triggers these dreams to realistic hope for the future, education stands out as a real answer. In ancient history, long before the advent of technology and introduction of Western education in Africa, Africans practiced indigenous education by word of mouth and using predominantly the things that fascinated them: language, society, farming, trading, handcrafting, and values were some of the informal traits that characterized education in Nigeria even before the colonization era.
If we go back in history, before we were colonized, there was education in Africa. There was education in Nigeria. And those times, our ancestors now used to have time with us, with folk tales. They'll teach us history while we sit down around them and we talk about it. So education more or less has been passed down through word of mouth and historical events.
As time progressed, the introduction of early Western education in Africa started growing with the influx of the colonial masters. In the 1840s, formal or Western primary education was introduced in Nigeria by Christian missionaries, and in 1859, CMS Grammar School Lagos was introduced as the first secondary school in Nigeria. 73 years after, in 1934, the first higher institution in the country, the Yaba Higher College, now Yaba College of Technology, was established, and then shortly afterwards, in 1948, the University College Ibadan, now University of Ibadan, was founded. The Nigerian educational system has since independence passed through structural transformational changes in a bid to stay in tune with relevant standards in the world of learning. Quite frankly, one of the major challenges of education in Nigeria has been poor funding. In the 2021 national budget, the education sector was allotted 5.6%, that is 742.5 billion naira out of the 13.08 trillion naira budgeted for the year, the lowest percentage allocation to the education sector in 10 years. In 2020, 6.7% of the budget was allocated to the education sector, 7.05% in 2019, 7.04% in 2018, and 7.4% in 2017. Despite this challenge of poor funding, the Nigerian education sector continues to play its role in the economic development of the country by increasing human capital development, reducing poverty rate, and boosting productivity in other sectors of the economy.
The education sector in Nigeria is actually quite large. Given the population size, we have a lot of schools. The World Bank estimates that 11 million people are employed in the education sector. It's actually the 5th largest employer of Nigerians, by industry sector.
Many years back, it used to be managed and mostly run by government. But over time, of course, we know what has happened in the economy of Nigeria. A lot of private enterprise and school businesses began to spring up. And of course, it's still regulated by the government. However, we have a lot of people playing in the business of education.
Education at all levels has been proven to be a worthwhile investment that equips, develops, and prepares a nation for development and the future world of innovation. Financing and providing education isn't just mere talks. It involves the full participation of all stakeholders in and outside the sector. In the early 1950s, the government of the Western region in Nigeria had proposed the free education scheme to help expand learning across its regions. This free education scheme was launched in January 1955, and it marked a milestone in the educational history of Nigeria as it paved the way for a remarkable growth of schools at all levels: primary, secondary, and tertiary, especially in the Western region. Teacher training institutions were also created and expanded with the aim of translating the government's proposal of education for all into reality. By the end of 1958, the number of primary schools in Nigeria had risen to more than 6,000, and more students were enrolled in schools at the primary level. Sadly, however, this free education scheme was halted in 1966 as the military took over the government in that year. Despite the suspension of free education in the country at the time, the importance of Western education continued to gain more recognition in the years that followed, and it was evident that the government couldn't do it on its own. Subsequently, the private sector started getting involved in the provision of quality and inclusive education in the country.
So in Lagos State, for instance, it's estimated that 2/3 of those who are in school age actually go to private schools. Only 1/3 go to the public schools. And that's largely because the public schools are not adequate to cater for the number of people in Lagos State.
In Lagos State now you have about 18,000 private schools, as compared to, I think, 5,000 public schools or so. So that tells you automatically that private schools are the ones providing education in Lagos State. In other states, I think it's also more of private schools. In some local governments, you do not have public schools or that many public schools. There was a DFID study that was done that said in the last 10 years, private sector had saved Lagos State 377 billion naira by actually providing education for students in Lagos State. Which means that if Lagos State had had to do it for the over 2 million that we are providing education for, they would have had to spend 377 billion.
The Nigerian educational curriculum, especially for primary and secondary school, has been designed in such a way that nearly excludes core aspects of learning like the use of technology, literacy, numeracy, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and research. As such, one may argue with verifiable facts that the curriculum is outdated and needs urgent revamping to meet up with international standards. This gap in the curriculum has resulted in lower standards of learning and low-quality graduates as presently obtainable in most schools across the country.
The Nigerian education system has been relatively in a comatose for a good period of time, so simply because the curriculum that we have been running is mostly outdated.
Our education has not really grown or changed to accommodate the requirements of the future. So for instance, what you're teaching today, somebody in primary school, that person is going to join the workforce maybe in another 15 to 20 years. So are you teaching today what would be relevant in 15 years? So that's one issue that, if you look at our education system, some of the books that I even used almost 35 years ago are still being used in our schools today.
We still have a typewriter in our business studies. So what is typewriter doing in our business studies? Who are we training for? Which economy? We're talking about, and guess what? We have robots in Nigeria that are doing stuff in Ibadan. They have a manufacturing outfit in one of the companies that is robot that is doing it. So there's a disconnect between what is happening. The world will leave us behind if we're not careful.
Major problems, of course, include capacity, include funding, include, the normal issues that have bedeviled the country, political upheavals and so on. If the private sector can support the public sector in many of these instances, it surely would be helpful.
When all the stakeholders begin to see themselves as partners, because it's really a social enterprise, first of all, before it becomes a business, because you are meeting a social need, a need that is very important to the growth of the economy.
The importance of education to a country's national development is no longer in doubt. Since Nigeria's independence in 1960, various policies in the interest of education have been formulated, all with the aim to developing education in the country. Unfortunately, these efforts have not produced the desired result. The issue that comes to mind, however, is the effect of poor educational policies or the lack of implementation of favorable policies for the growth of education in the country. Apart from the problem of policy implementation, a few other factors like weak political structure, corruption, disjointed government parastatal have inhibited the growth of the educational sector in Nigeria.
Universal Basic Education is an intervention fund that's supposed to help basic education. They give funding to basic education in state level, SUBEB, like primary school. So they give you funding for infrastructure, they give you funding for training teachers and all of that. But the challenge is that they ask the states to bring counterpart funding. So before they can release money to you, you have to bring the counterpart. And a lot of states are already struggling, and then they dictate to you and say 70% has to go on infrastructure. And I've just said that infrastructure is not the key.
Then there are too many parastatals all over the place that, different level of parastatals deal with different things in education. So it's disjointed. We need to streamline that so that the revenue, the recurrent expenditure is not that high.
So you want to establish a school today. So which of the parastatals apart from Ministry of Education are you answerable to? So you have quite a number of them. This one is coming. We are the one that is actually having, a controlling power to be able to manage what we are doing and all of that. So quite a number of taxes at different levels, local government, state, federal, even very conflicting, taxes here and there. So, this makes life, exceedingly difficult for private sectors.
I actually feel that if you set up a private school, they shouldn't be taxed. They're doing a social service. So why are they paying taxes, whether VAT or water bill? So, and that could be another incentive for people who actually want to work in the education sector. So that if you know that I'm working in the education sector and you're not, it's tax-free income, then there's more attraction for you to want to go into those areas.
The Nigerian educational implementation of standard is not there. Because we have every document to show what we should do. Implementing it is what we don't have. Do you know that if our curriculum was implemented really good, we will have a stream of young handymen graduate from GSS 3 ready for work, because the curriculum would have taken them through mechanics, through electrical tutelage, through masonry.
When there's a policy to say that children should have access to education, is it being implemented? Are those, are there opportunities for children to go to school? So if you say it's free education, and we just have one public school in the whole of a community, and a child has to walk like 1.5 hours to get to that public school, have we fulfilled? So the implementation, making sure that those policies are being enabled by the infrastructure, the things that we have around, is really key.
Digital education in today's fast technological age is highly essential in primary education, where it presents avenues through which learners can interact thoughtfully, invent creatively, and maximize opportunities to change the world around them. However, the idea of a classroom structure form of education still appears quite evidently as an adequate tool for imparting knowledge and inspiring learning. One of the responsibilities of government is to ensure that affordable education is available for its citizens. As of 2020, there were more than 33,000 public primary schools in Nigeria and about 80,000 privately owned secondary schools. Participation of the private sector in education in Nigeria is important to providing quality and inclusive learning. Increased private sector involvement can also improve pedagogic, technical, and management skills across all levels of education.
In Lagos State alone, of the 18,000 private schools, 12,000 are low-cost, affordable schools. Public schools don't have enough spaces for children, it's overcrowded and so on and so forth. So they go to low-cost affordable schools. And we define low-cost affordable schools as those who charge school fees of 25,000 naira and below.
Because the important thing is, rather than a child walking around on the street and getting up to no good, if the child is in a classroom, in a school, even if the school does not have all the frills that you want, does not have the ballet, does not have the land, but quality assurance has gone to that school and know that they have good teachers, and they are teaching the curriculum well, you're expecting them, then we should have more. And that's the challenge, is that there's a friction between the minimum standards that the Ministry of Education has in practically all states in Nigeria and what the private educator, low-income private educator can do. Meanwhile, they are providing a very good service of keeping young people from the street.
I do feel that government needs to, for instance, give them significant tax rebates. A lot of the schools complain about multiple taxes, signages, plus teachers pay as you go, and all sorts of taxes that schools need to pay.
They need funding. That's number one. They can improve on their sources of funding. They can improve on the management of their resources. And if they can work out better corporate governance plans, I think that's the greatest help they need. But primarily, they need access to funds to be able to grow their schools.
So that's where a bank like mine comes in. We focus only on education, and we provide them with what we call affordable loans, structured and tailored to how they collect fees. So if you're collecting 5,000 naira per term, you can only repay your loans on a termly basis, for instance.
So one of the things I think the Lagos State government, that I can speak for, is doing is that they're investing in them. They're going to improve their teaching and learning. They're going to give them tablets. They're going to fund them. They're going to make sure that, because really the most important factor in the school is not the building, it's the teacher. If you have a solid teacher, you can put him under the roof there. So long as he knows his onions, he will teach.
What I would only want to advise is that for some of those premium schools, so they need to probably, introduce corporate social responsibility, wherein they probably will, adopt some of those low-fee based schools and support them, to things that materials, equipment, and infrastructure that they cannot acquire on their own, and you will have to support them.
Investing in education and the processes of learning provides a world of benefits for not just the learners, but society and the country as a whole. And of course, it provides a great return on investments for both the individual and the economy. Arguably, one major impact of education is the opportunity it gives an individual to reason, question processes, and think critically. For most developing countries in Africa and other parts of the world, education provides access for mastering technological and problem-solving skills that are potent tools for development and innovation. Today, with increased awareness of electronic learning, technology is continuing to play a role in the flexibility of education, thus creating opportunities for skilled ICT personnel. The edutech space also speaks volume in the opportunities education provides for society. Learning content can be stored in digital devices for self-paced learning, and more technical colleges can be equipped to train skilled workers who will function in different fields of work.
Schools still remain schools. The innovation that has come in, we've seen EdTech, people come in with what we call remote learning now, especially with COVID, the lockdown. That has forced schools to start looking at how to use technology in schools.
Basically, right now, everything boils down to affordability. The opportunities that exist are things that will also need a lot of capital.
It's really the top end of private schools that have a lot of those facilities, so online resources or using mobile phones for learning and so on. Whereas if you look at in the advanced world, those are typical. When you see the picture of a classroom, every single table has a desktop attached to it. You're doing your assignments and submitting them online.
Beyond the classroom walls and the intricacies of learning, English vocabularies, mathematical mumbo-jumbo, and innovations in science, the world of education cuts across aspects of skills acquisition and technical competences relevant for national growth. In 2019, according to the National University Commission, NUC, there were a total of 134 recognized polytechnics and 174 universities in Nigeria, including federal, state, and privately owned, admitting about 2 million students with about 600,000 graduates each year. However, data from the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics show that 13.9 million Nigerians were unemployed as of 2020. Graduates and postgraduates combined made up about 2.9 million of the total Nigerians that were unemployed. Today, the Nigerian undergraduate is mostly affected in this systemic inefficiency as they are not assured of getting the right jobs even after graduation. And what's more, with little or no prerequisite technical skills, graduates may be stuck in the quagmire of adapting in today's digital world. Technical and Vocational Education and Training, TVET, has been designed mainly to provide learners with hands-on practical skills, technical know-how and understanding necessary for employment. Courses under TVET will expose the Nigerian youth to professional skills and certification like carpentry and joinery, masonry, garment making, plumbing, welding and fabrication, computer science, and many more. In addition to technical colleges, monotechnics and polytechnics, the federal government of Nigeria recently approved Vocational Enterprise Institutions, VEIs, and Innovation Enterprise Institutions, IEIs, to provide a veritable alternative route to higher education. Given the high youth unemployment in the country and a need for human capital, the TVET sector is definitely one area the government can leverage to improve certified skilled workers and reduce unemployment in Nigeria.
Definitely, like TVET, technical vocation, is not as explored as it should be. Really, what a lot of young people need now is skills. They need to have the foundation of education, have those 5 subjects or 6 subjects, but they need skills.
You see that in those days we produce a lot of artisans, very good electricians, very good, masons, very good carpenters, and all of those things. But today we no longer have, technical colleges that are very, specific to train people in this direction.
We're doing a lot of road construction. We're doing a lot of housing. We're in the development phase as a third world nation because we're still building infrastructure. So that's where we should be skilling our young people.
Technology is really playing a lot of great role in education today, and we have not tapped into it seriously. So knowledge of artificial intelligence is overrunning almost everything now, and there is a need for us to start from the youthful age, primary, secondary. We need to start introducing them to things like robotics, things like coding, and drone technology, and all of those things. They need to start from beginning.
You see the private sector having dedicated schools for computer program, but it should be infused within curriculum. So if you set up a school where right from school students are learning coding and learning maths, especially also for girls.
In the US, they make sure that you do a minor, you do a major, you do your course, but if you are a good athlete or you're good at football, they encourage you.
We should be having creative schools where you learn drama, communication, screenwriting, and all of those things, but you find that they're very, very scarce.
The foundation of basic education starts from the early years of a child's life. These very important years make up the formative stage of learning, where cognitive, coordination, literacy, and numeracy skills are developed in a child. This is called early childhood education. At its most basic level, early childhood education, ECE, encompasses all forms of education, both formal and informal, provided to young children up to approximately 7 years of age. This education is fundamental to the development of a child and can significantly shape the later years of an individual's life. According to the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, early childhood care and education, ECCE, is more than preparation for primary school. It aims at the holistic development of a child's social, emotional, cognitive, and physical needs in order to build a solid and broad foundation for lifelong learning and well-being.
Childhood education in Nigeria is neglected, and that is where the formation starts from. The human brain develops 50% between the ages of 0 to maximum 7 years. It develops another 25% from 7 to about 20 or 21. The remaining 25% develops from that 21 to when you die. So if I ask you, when is the most important part to introduce things to the child? between 0 and 7. That's early childhood.
We don't have enough early childhood schools. So we have creche, creche, you just put your child, the nurse is supposed to look after your child. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, the learning, playing with toys, cognitive skills, critical thinking, all those things actually start at that early age, and there is a significant gap in that area.
If you look at advanced countries, you will realize that their focus on early childhood education shows in their policies, it shows in their funding, because they have an idea of what this eventually will turn out to be in the economy of their country. So it's a win-win relationship. But if you look at in Nigeria, you realize that the early childhood education is not even being looked at all.
The best thing we can do for children to make them future ready is give them Montessori education, because it has a broad base. I keep saying it anywhere. If one is given an opportunity to rejig suburb or wherever it is that they have that early childhood, the Ministry of Women Affairs or something, that is a place that they can begin a new Nigeria.
If we start from the government, how many early childhood schools do we have in Lagos State, for example? If you look at even where the ministry is being domiciled, it's not in the Ministry of Education. It's under, it used to be Ministry of Women Affairs, and then it's now Ministry of Youth. So in quote, in the minds of even the government, it's not education as it were. So if I could use the phrase, most people just see early childhood education as the sector that, just go and let the house be at peace.
Setting up an educational facility to provide value and services should be a profitable venture. After all, if getting education isn't cheap, providing education should yield profit.
The education industry is majorly filled with people that start with passion, so they are driven by their why. But you come to realize that as much as it's a social enterprise, it is a business.
The business side of providing education involves planning, training, administration, and the quality of services delivered.
People just set up schools, they don't really understand the complexities and the nuances of setting up schools and of running schools profitably and effectively.
When you look at your business model, what are your costs? How do you charge school fees? What are the options for making sure that your school fees actually covers the cost of running the school, or are there other avenues for you to earn income in other areas as well?
The challenge we have always been having is people thinking that, if I get into education, I want to go and make money there, and you lose the passion, you lose the steam, you don't have, the wherewithal to be able to offer, premium services and the like. And that is why even when your customers discovered that, we are not really getting any value for even what we pay for, even if it is small, they won't want to stay.
We want to be able to teach school owners that yes, you are running a school, but you are also running a business. How do you ensure that there's proper governance? Most schools, it depends on just the founder. Everything is the founder. So they don't have a governance board. They don't have, those structures in place. And then how do you do succession planning? How are you training the next generation? How do you hand over your school, and make sure that it's not just only you? Those are some of the things that I feel that people who run schools need to learn.
Without missing out on its purpose, it is important to note the array of opportunities in the educational sector when planning, adequate funding, and proper management are in place. With the importance of child learning, irrespective of gender or ethnic inclination, clearly defined, sustaining the ropes of education in Nigeria should emerge from collaborative efforts of every stakeholder across the value chain. Effective management of the system should be priority where learning outcomes can be tracked and visible, skills and competence level can be increased, and learners can rest assured of an educational system that truly works.
Government shouldn't even be involved in running schools, but you can have endowments and funding that you then give into schools so that those schools are run properly.
We don't want our children to leave Nigeria and not be able to feel fitting in any economy that they go to.
We always look at a BSc, a degree. I have even argued that, okay, fine, if we recognize that we want vocational skills, technical skills, Who says you can't have a BSc in carpentry or BSc in, whatever, if that's what Nigerians like, that BSc.
All the people who are not able to fund themselves, government must provide scholarships or provide solid public sector education if we know what we're doing.
There should be incentives for people to actually become teachers. Government should offer scholarships so you have your education assured. They should be able to guarantee them jobs so that the best and the brightest actually should become the teachers.
So, looking at the curriculum, one has to look at how do we infuse patriotism. How do we infuse history for our children to learn history from this country and other countries?
The opportunity also exists for us to build a curriculum in our language, to teach children in our language. I was looking at a teacher in America who actually did Pythagoras' theorem in Yoruba. I was so amazed, and I was telling myself, if a Yoruba child listens to this, the child will understand these concepts easier than for the child coming to school and then they are speaking English and say, and then you are there dancing. That opportunity exists as well.
The school owners themselves is to make sure that they're running a school that they are tracking the learning outcomes. It's not enough for people to just pass out through your school and you give them certificates, and then the workforce, we keep complaining that even graduates can't write letters, can't speak proper English, all those kind of things. So what do we need in terms of schools? What competencies do we require?
There's a need for a stakeholders meeting, a coming together of everybody. Because if everybody comes together and we all talk together and still can we have a consensus on why and how we're going to educate the Nigerian child? Don't go and force somebody to become a doctor when that's not what the community is calling for.
Yes, in the end, everyone has a role to play in building the educational system in Nigeria. Students, teachers, parents, school owners, investors, stakeholders, and the government, adding value to society and the country at large for today and the future, should be the goal in mind for everyone in the educational chain.